Ethan, Xana, Maddie, and Kaylee were four friends living their best lives. All students at the University of Idaho in Moscow, Idaho, a place with a reputation as being incredibly safe. But in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, those four students were stabbed to death inside their off-campus residence. The brutal crime shook the community and touched the nation, setting off an intense manhunt for a killer. Investigators from the Moscow police joined forces with the Idaho State Police and the FBI, following every lead, every tip, and every piece of evidence. That investigation took them across the country to Pennsylvania and led them to this man, a grad student at a neighboring university in Pullman, Washington. This accused mass killer has denied the allegations and claims to have an alibi. In our investigation, we'll return to the scene of the crime. What does it look like now? We'll retrace the alleged route of the killer. How were investigators able to track him? We'll search for answers as we investigate the Idaho student murders.
One of the first things you notice when you come here now, you can kind of see behind me, the house is no longer here. I know my face is a little cut off right now, but it's no longer here. Like you mentioned, it was demolished. There was some emotion surrounding that demolition because some of the parents felt that it was a critical piece of evidence. The university officials felt like it was the first step of healing. But regardless of that, I did take a look around the perimeter, making sense of what's left here of the property and also making sense of what could have happened the night that Brian Kohberger allegedly went inside that property. Take a look.
We are here at that King Road location where Ethan Chapin, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Kaylee Gonsalves tragically lost their lives in November of 2022. And as you look behind me here, I'll step out of the frame a little bit, you can see that house is no longer here. They demolished it in December of 2023. There's still, though, memorials left out here, some stuffed animals, some flowers. Obviously, this community still really cares for these four young students. But regardless of this house being here now, we still want to give you a lay of the land of what is still here and what investigators have to go on as far as pinpointing where and how alleged suspect Brian Kohberger got into the house in that early morning hour of November 13th, 2022. Of course, this is the space where the home would have been, in between these private residences and over to the left, these apartment buildings. Now, people who lived in this apartment building back then said it used to be pitch black all throughout this parking lot. As you can see, there's no street lights anywhere, but soon after those murders, this light bulb right here, people who lived at the residence said this light bulb was replaced to give it a little more illumination around this area. And of course, they still have it roped off. Not too long ago, all of this was sealed off by crime tape. And here's some of those memorials I was talking about. As you can see, flowers, stuffed animals. Put a little bit more in focus here, some candles. Looks like a framed picture right there. Obviously, these girls and Ethan were very much so cared for by the community. And you can see this fence going up the right of where the property would have been. Now, all of that is, of course, private property. We can't go up there. And likely that Brian Kohberger could not have gone up there either if he did commit these crimes. But we want to take you up this hill right here to this back parking lot to where his car, that white Elantra that's reported on in the court documents, may have been parked that night. So as we stand here on this side hill, this side road that would have gone up the left side of that property, we can see that it's not really easily accessible by foot. I'll zoom in. Given the fact that there's a pretty big drop off right here, it looks to be maybe 3 or 4 feet. You know, you could easily hurt yourself and get injured if you're trying to come off the bat. And there are also these rusted, looks as if to be what used to be fence posts. Maybe there used to be a fence here to kind of, you know, keep it separated from this building that is over here behind me. But again, you can see not that accessible, at least by foot, definitely not by car on this side. And also as we stand here, you can tell that it's not that busy of a road. There's not a single car that's come by for the minutes I've been here so far. But at one point in time when the house was here, outside of these trees, it did provide a pretty clear look into the side windows of some of those bedrooms of the house, and even a peek into the kitchen on the second floor where the crimes allegedly happened. Up here is the back parking lot to those apartments, and as I pan to the left, you can see that it also leads right to where the back of the King Road house where the victims lived at the time. Now, of course, the leaves are a little grown up now, but in November when it was a little cold, the leaves are off the trees, provided a clear view right into the back windows of some of those bedrooms and a super clear view of the kitchen, those glass sliding doors leading to the second floor that could have provided access inside the house. Remember that police reported there was no signs of forced entry into the home once they arrived. And they also believe that this back lot could have been where the alleged suspect Brian Koberger parked his car and scoped out the scene that night of November 12th into November 13th when the crimes happened. Again, this is the back lot right behind where that house used to sit.
Welcome back to my mental health and crime channel. My name is Huda London. This is for educational purpose only. This is the case of the Idaho quadruples. May the victims rest in peace, condolence to their families, and may the correct justice be served. This is for fair use purpose and educational purpose. I find it strange that this light in Queens Road, which is right next to the girl's house, 1122 Kings Road, was busted. It was broken. The light bulb did not work for whatever reason. And I personally believe that this quadruples was pre-planned. Whether it was pre-planned a week before the unalivings, or a couple of days, or a couple of hours, I personally believe it was pre-planned. The reason I say that is observing everything that's happening in the grub truck and Banfield makes me believe that it was pre-planned. And especially the fact that Jack John Showalter Jr. Jack John Showalter clearly said to the girls, "You know they're going to get you for this, Maddie." That was a couple of hours before the 4 victims were unalived. So was it just a coincidence that this light was off that night? Or was it on purpose? Was it intentional? Because without this light, the whole place turns dark. So I believe somebody could have just broken it, got rid of it. After the quadruples, the light was fixed because people were in fear. Why did they actually demolish the house? It's an important question. Was it to get rid of the 3 unidentified male DNAs, allegedly? Or was it because they just wanted to pack this case up, demolish the place so that it wouldn't affect the new students enrolling into this university? Didn't these 4 victims mean a lot for the university? Why didn't they respect the parents' wish? At least up to the trial, they could have let the jury come and see it personally. The minute they demolished this house is actually when I started getting suspicious about this case. Why would you demolish a crime scene? that doesn't happen often. I do understand the students are grieving for the loss of their friends, some of them, and many of them are new. So why should it bother the new students? This was a crime scene. They could have just wrapped the whole house with a nice material so that it doesn't look odd and just leave it to the trial. But I guess the 4 victims didn't mean that much, in my opinion. Now that the house is gone and we can see the back here properly, I could imagine that anyone could have been hiding behind those bushy trees and peeping into Maddie and Kaylee's window. Maddie's window was clear to see. Kaylee said, it was allegedly said that Kaylee had a stalker. So was there someone peeping into Kaylee's room or Maddie's room? It is kind of creepy. Anyone could have been just hiding there and watching the girls, even the frat boys. So if the suspect or suspects came from this side, it's like 3 steps down. Person has to be careful. I personally believe that it's someone who knows the victims, someone who knows the layout of the house. I just don't buy that a random stranger just came by himself and did this all. Up to today, I wonder if Brian Christopher Kohlberger knew any of the surviving roommates or the 4 victims. Has he visited this house before? Could he have known someone in this house? Because that would make more sense. The person would have to know the layout inside the house. Others, they would have ended up tripping and making noise. There are a lot of steps there. And we saw the 4 figures running. That's why up to today I say I believe Brian Christopher Kohlberger could have been involved, but there were others too. So if something was going on, allegedly, in Linda Lane, I believe the people in Queen's apartment and this side, the car park, would have definitely heard it. Are they trying to say that they all were sleeping and they didn't hear a sound? Enan said he heard a scream. The students are scared to tell who did this. If you knew somebody who did a quadruple, would you tell? Anyone could have been standing here and peeping into Maddie's room. The girls used to sit out at the backyard a lot. So I'm sure somebody could have been easily stalking them.
The Washington State University campus. More specifically, I'm at the complex where Brian Kohlberger lived right here behind me during the time of the Idaho student murders. Now, this is the location from where he drove to the King Road house in Moscow, Idaho, just a few minutes across the Idaho state line. I have the location queued up into GPS. I want to take you guys on the drive, what it would have looked like for Brian Kohlberger to take that night. The GPS says it's only about 18 minutes away, so not too far of a drive. And of course, right now it's just after 8 o'clock here in Pullman, Washington, and we do know that Brian Koberger left this location around 2:53 a.m. So of course it would have been much darker, but at least while we still have a little bit of light outside, I want you guys to see what the drive would have looked like for him as we go from here to Idaho, the University of Idaho, to that King Road house location. So right now, we're going to take a little trip. We're beginning that drive that Brian Koberger would have made that night of November 12th, going into the morning of November 13th on the way to Moscow, Idaho. Again, we're here in Washington State's campus, leaving Brian Koberger's apartment complex. Now, one of the first things I am noticing is that I don't see, or at least readily see, any security cameras that are clearly in sight. But we do know that according to the probable cause affidavit, that at least 5 cameras on WSU's campus and around the campus caught Koberger's white Elantra leaving around 2:53 a.m. and coming back after 5 a.m. Of course, we know those murders occurred somewhere in that window of time. Now, as I'm coming up to the exit point of campus, we see a lot of these light posts adjacent to the sidewalk here on my right. Now, what I have noticed is that every single one of those light posts that I've seen has a camera sitting right on top, a security camera. So any one of these, if this was one of the roads he took getting back on campus, could have been one of the cameras that picked him up in that white Elantra. As we've made our way off of campus out to one of the main roads nearby, you can see these huge, massive expanses of land on either side of the road. But what you don't see are streetlights or surveillance cameras out here. So I'd imagine after midnight, it's just after 8 o'clock here, but after midnight, I imagine it to be incredibly dark outside of headlights from your car or a few other cars passing by. And you see there's not too many of them right now, not that busy of a road. I can only imagine it to be less busy, again, after midnight, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., when he was allegedly out heading toward Moscow. So now we've made it to SR 270, State Road 270, the main road connecting Pullman to Moscow, Idaho. A little bit busier. You see traffic intersections, a lot more cars, a lot more businesses on either side. There's a sign, "Welcome to Moscow." And as I'm pulling into this intersection, I see several surveillance cameras. More than likely, some of which that picked his car up, that white Hyundai Elantra, the night of the murders. Here we are. We have reached the campus of the University of Idaho. There's the marquee right there out front. So now we are officially on campus, heading toward the King Road house, where the 4 victims lost their lives that night. There's a little lay of the land, some fields here on the right, looks like intramural fields. Some sort of barns of sorts, probably for the agriculture school up towards the right. So we're coming here, I see a few more cars, a little more busy around this area. A lot more street lights as well. They haven't quite turned on yet, but there are plenty of them out here. So I imagine it when it gets extremely dark that it's not, too dark. It's well lit once these street lights cut on. So now we've made our way through the depths of the University of Idaho campus. As you can see, there's a group of students right here in front of me. Very busy out here as school is preparing to start back. But right up here, as we make this left turn onto...
Is Jack D still in Idaho, Moscow? Because we can still see that white pickup car. If you see on the left-hand side with the tinted windows. And we heard he sold his white Hyundai Elantra a week after the unalivings. I wonder if it's somebody else's pickup car or if it's Jack D's. But anyway, Jack D lives here. His alibi was that he was sleeping. He could have literally gone from the behind, allegedly in my opinion, through those trees without anyone noticing him, taking the back roads, and he would have come to the house within 2 minutes.
very busy out here as school is preparing to start back, but right up here as we make this left turn onto King Road, up here on the right, I'll slow it down just a little bit, is where the King Road house would have been. You can see it's blocked off right here. This is the drive that Kohberger would have had to take that night to get to this location on November 13th, 2022. We have just wrapped up that drive from Kohberger's apartment in Pullman over here to the University of Idaho in Moscow to the King Road location. Of course, the house still would have been sitting there. The sun has set, and it is still to be determined as to what Brian Kohberger allegedly did or where he went once he got here. But this is what that drive would have looked like for him.
Thank you, Coach TV. It was an interesting ride. Definitely Brian Kohberger could have been involved. The reason I personally believe that he could have been involved, but not all by himself, is because why would he sit in prison for almost 2 years if he didn't commit these crimes? His alibi doesn't make sense, honestly. He went stargazing, or he was driving around at night. And what bothers me so much is that when the FBI went to Pennsylvania to arrest him, he was wearing a box of shorts, a t-shirt, and he was sitting and he had on gloves, medical gloves, and he was trying to put things in, like kind of evidence in plastic, transparent bags. And let's not forget, he was throwing the bin in the neighbor's bin. Why would you be throwing your bin into the neighbor's bin? That's definitely so that the police wouldn't trace you, but that was too late. He could be involved maybe by knowing what took place, maybe by allegedly lending his knife and knife sheet to the people who did these horrific crimes. He could have given them a lift. He could have actually visited someone around these areas. But his alibi doesn't make sense. And Dylan Mortensen, his description doesn't make sense either.
Interview with the author of the new book about the murder of 4 University of Idaho students, with the focus on the suspect of the case, Brian Kohberger, and his family. In the days after the slayings, were they suspicious that he could be the killer? Here's Jim Murray.
Long before cops charged Brian Kohberger with the murders of 4 University of Idaho students, his own family feared he was the killer.
The facts are there. It doesn't take too much genius to start having suspicions.
Author Howard Bloom says in his new book, When the Night Comes Falling, that Kohberger's sister became convinced he was the killer after police launched a nationwide search for a white Elantra like his.
You know they're looking for a white car. You know your brother lives 10 miles away from the house where 4 people were killed. You know your brother has had psychological problems. You have to connect all the dots.
The book claims that Kohberger's sister confronted their father with her worst fears. She believed that Brian was behind the murders that the whole country was fixated on. But her father turned his back and walked away. But Michael Kohberger also became suspicious, especially when on a 2,500-mile drive across country with his son, cops pulled them over twice.
So you're coming from Washington State University?
Looks like we punched the driver for hours.
He thinks this is it, and he begins to fear, as it was explained to me, what will be waiting for his son and his family at the other end of America when they finally make this trip home.
15 days later, SWAT teams raided the family home in Pennsylvania.
They found Kohberger at about 2 in the morning sitting in the kitchen, and what he was doing, he was sorting through his own personal garbage, putting it into plastic bags that he could put someplace else, so with the belief that the police could never get his DNA, perhaps they couldn't track him down.
Today, Kohberger appears hollow-eyed and gaunt. Hard to believe. He once weighed over 300 pounds.
He loses 130 pounds approximately in high school. Then he builds his body up. He has his stomach tuck surgery. He has dreams of becoming a player.
But he remained a loner with demons that prosecutors say drove him to kill 4 innocent young people.
Harvard Bloom needs to really learn to say the word allegedly. Brian Christopher Kohberger, his court case hasn't even started, and people are judging him so harshly. We all are entitled to believe what we want to believe. But when Mr. Bloom says this is a fact, that his sister allegedly thought that her brother Brian Kohberger was the person who unalived the 4 students. There's nothing wrong in that. But even if Harvard Bloom got information from a source, from whatever or whoever, he shouldn't be stating it as a fact. This is what is so toxic, because this is literally spoiling the case, tampering with the case, people will judge to quick judgments, and they will ignore if there's any other suspects. People are too focused on BK. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if BK was part of it, but I don't believe he did it alone. How did Harvard Bloom find out that Brian Christopher Kohberger had a tummy tuck operation? And even if he found out that information, I think it's a bit confidential. That shouldn't be coming out in the public. Especially not so early on in this case. The case hasn't even gone to trial. Is Harvard Bloom trying to pollute the jury's mind? The public's mind? Sometimes I wonder if he works for the people who want this case gone, or want BK to be the faulty guy. He even mentions that BK's sister knew that it was her brother who did it because he said he has psychological problems. Now see, this is where I personally get upset, because as a licensed mental health counselor, it is wrong to say that someone has psychological problems when Harvard Bloom, you are not the psychiatrist that diagnosed him. You're not the psychologist. You're not the therapist. You're a journalist who's written many books. I believe you're doing a good job in the beginning of this case when you're working for Airmail, but now I believe you've just become opportunists. Everyone is searching allegedly for their benefits, but by coming here and accusing a man who hasn't had his fair share in trial, you are just tampering with the case. You can never say that it's facts because you haven't seen his medical record. And if you saw BK's medical record, then your license, if you have any license as a journalist, will be revoked. You would end up in prison too. And especially the fact that you're saying it's a fact. No, it's not a fact. Brian Christopher Kohberger's mental health and physical health medical record was sealed in a gag order. Give the guy a break. If he's guilty, the jury will find him guilty. That is their job. But as a journalist, you should know better, in my opinion. And stop throwing out labels saying that he has psychological problems. Yes, at times I wonder when I look at BK. Without judging him, I wonder. I've always wondered from the very beginning of this case up to today. Does BK suffer of any personality disorders? And the reason I say that is I don't believe it's genetic if he has mental health illnesses. I believe it's due to all the heavy drugs he was using for 4 or 5 years. That's a long time to be using A-class. We know that he has snow vision. We believe that he has OCD. But we don't know of any other psychological issues or mental health illnesses, because that is strictly confidential between Brian Christopher Kohberger, his psychiatrist, his therapist, etc. It's only the judge that can but it's only the judge that can check into his medical records and allow the prosecutor and the defense attorney to discuss about it or argue about it. If he has mental health illness, I wonder if he's going to plead insanity. Brian Christopher Kohberger's just got that stare in his eyes. I hate to say this, but he doesn't blink often. But what I've noticed is he's too tall to have fit the height DM was talking about. This man is 6'1", 6'2". She said 5'11". But why was his knife sheath there? And why does his timeline suck? I wonder if Brian could have been stalking Kaylee. Allegedly because Kaylee had a stalker. Although the police debunked that. But the manager from the vape shop believes that Kaylee had a stalker because Maddie and Kaylee told him. Could that have been Brian Christopher Kohberger? And could possibly Kaylee have said, leave me alone? That could have just triggered him if he was having any mental health issues. It is a possibility. We have to look at it from every angle. I'm not one of the channels who say Brian Christopher Koberger is completely innocent. Shout out to Denise, because Denise and myself have had hours and hours of discussion, maybe once a month, once in 3 weeks, about this case. And no matter what we discuss about in this case, we both agree that BK could have had some involvement. But the question is, how much involvement? And I'm starting to actually believe what Brian Entin said in the beginning of this case, that BK asked, have the others been caught? The more I look into this case, the more it starts making sense that he could have said it. In my opinion, allegedly. Howard Bloom said that, sorry, I'm just a bit under the weather, but Howard Bloom said that Brian Christopher Koberger's older sister, I assume, who's a licensed mental health counselor too, had some suspicions that it was her brother who did it. After she checked how far he lives from the girls, I'm sure if he did it, it would have showed from his reaction. And I'll give her credit to one thing. She works in the same branch as me. She's a mental health counselor. So she has the skills to see, observe, feel, assess, his feelings, his behavior, especially his behavior. But who is to say that it's true what Howard Bloom is saying? Because he's not giving up his sources. He's writing a book, or he wrote the book. He's making his money out of it, which is unfair because the court hasn't even started. So this is not good for BK. But back to his sister, I'm sure with the mental health counseling practitioner skills, I'm sure if she said it, then she would know more than us. That's his sister. And not only because that she's a mental health counselor, the fact that she grew up with him, she knows her brother. So she would know if he has psychological issues, if he has any mental health illness. Like example, antisocial personality disorder. Because whoever did this crime, if BK did it, then he must have been suffering of any personality disorder, maybe even schizophrenia, from when he was young. So the family would have known him. This is all allegedly, and this is all my opinion, guys. What I'm trying to say is, as a therapist, she would have seen changes in her brother, his behavior. Let's not forget, Koberger has been to A-class rugs for 5 years. He could have developed a mental health illness from there, just like I always have said about Sean Puffy Combs, P. Diddy. His behavior from when he was young looked more like he had antisocial personality disorder. He was always a narcissistic character. He loves power. He doesn't show empathy. He has no remorse. I'm talking about P. Diddy. All the victims that are coming out, it's become a circus, are saying the same things. So mental health illness, and I hate to say this, I just realized BK and P. Diddy have something in common. They both were under rug addictions. I'm talking about A-class rugs. P. Diddy was giving away pink, COCAIN, and Koberger was on heroin for 5 years. See, they could easily have psychosis and such things, allegedly. So I'm sure his sister knew something. And if she warned her dad, like Howard Bloom is saying, and the father ignored it, then there's something not right with the father either. As a parent, you can be in denial, but after the shock, you would know what to do. Talk to your son and ask him to turn himself in. That is, if he's guilty. But if his sister is speaking like that, then there's something with Koberger. Koberger was having a difficult time with his senior professor who gave him the teacher assisting job. He was on his final warning and he was about to lose the job. So what if he thought, since example Maddie or Katie, whoever he liked, keep on rejecting me, they could have said something nasty to him. So maybe he built up rage and hate. Allegedly. I wonder who Brian Christopher Koberger is working with. Because I believe, in my opinion, he had something to do with this. But how much was he a participant in the quadruples that took place is the question. Or it could be totally innocent and maybe he wasn't even there. Maybe they planted the knife sheet. Everything is possible. Nobody knows the answers to this case, and the question is, will we ever find out exactly what happened that night? Are they just going to brush it up, brush off everything, like they deleted the 3 unidentified male DNAs? Like they demolished the house? Let me know what y'all think about this. Do y'all think that Howard Bloom is giving us facts or his fantasies or his fictions? Because he seems to be very negative towards Brian Koberger that sometimes I wonder who is he working for, allegedly. That's all in my opinion. I really pray and hope that these 4 students get the correct justice. That is my number 1 priority, and I'm sure it's everyone's priority. They deserve the correct justice, whether it was the frat boys, whether it was Koberger, whether it was Koberger with the frat boys, and maybe the grub truck boys, or the jacks, whoever it was. Nobody should get away with this horrific quadruples. Look at the beautiful smiles. They didn't deserve this. No human being deserves this. Rest in peace, beautiful souls. May the correct justice be served for you all. Thank you to all my subscribers for your patience, for your kindness, mindfulness, respect in the comment channel. I really appreciate you all. Have a lovely day.